Hello and welcome to Art with Mr. P. We're back to drawing again this week, but first of all I'd like you to search online for a piece of artwork. Actually it's the front of a magazine called The Blast No. 2 by Wyndham Lewis. Now Wyndham Lewis produced this piece of artwork in 1915, so that's during the First World War, and is over 100 years ago. Now, like all pictures, there are some questions you can ask yourselves. You can ask yourselves about what kind of lines Wyndham Lewis used, what kinds of shapes he produced, and what decisions did he make about the colour. Why do you think we should look at the work of famous artists? Well, I've got three quick answers for you. First of all, like reading any story, because that's what looking at a picture is, it's like reading a story but without words and letters, yeah? When you read a picture, it makes you feel better. It's good for you. Secondly, of course, the more you do it, the better you get at it. So in this world that we live in now, where there is so much visual information, it's important to be what they call visually literate, so that you can recognize and read pictures well. And thirdly, and most importantly, of course, looking at famous artwork is just fun. So let's us be creative, let's us have some fun. So Wyndham Lewis produced Blast No. 2 in 1915, and he was one of the leaders of the Vorticists movement, which was peculiar to the United Kingdom and emerged just before and during the First World War. Now, this was a time of radical change, and the artists, these Vorticists artists, had become a little bit obsessed and very, very interested in how machines would change how we live, how they would change not only our lives, but the world about us. Yeah. So when we look at the blast, what we see are lots of bits of machinery. There are some people in there, and lots of straight lines and what look like buildings to me. Very, very, very 20th century. Very, very radical, very different for so early on in the 20th century. Yeah? So we're talking about just over 100 years ago. So we're going to use the Blast No. 2 as our starting point, and we're going to retell Wyndham Lewis's story. We're not copying it. We're using it as a starting point. So we're retelling it using our own shapes and lines, yeah? So I'm going to start off using a ruler and a pencil. And I'm going to use a variety of straight lines. So I'm going to use a range. I'm going to use a whole load of different straight lines to show how exciting machines can be. Now, this is not new because machines have taken over in their own way during our lifetimes, but they're digital machines rather than mechanical, yeah? So they're about computers more than they are about bits of metal, yeah? So you'll notice on the original Wyndham Lewis that the lines tend to go off the edges quite a lot. They're all at different angles, well, not all at different angles, but they're interesting angles, lots of diagonals. And what this does, it makes it very, very angular, very, very purposeful. Yeah, so there's a lot of energy in this, but it's all very, very controlled. Yeah. But when you produce a piece of artwork and it goes off the edge of the page, yeah, it gives it a sense of energy, yeah, almost like it's moving. And this is what the Vorticists were like. Yeah? This is what they liked about the world that they lived in. Yeah. They liked the idea that we could move fast. I mean, let's think. To put it in perspective, you think that cars, the actual idea of a car, was fairly new. Most people didn't own cars. Almost, hardly anyone owned a car. So the quickest you could go would be galloping on a horse or running or going on the train, yeah? But suddenly you can go really, really fast in your really, really fast car, yeah? So we've got some like buildings up here. Now some of these shapes are put together so they start to look a bit three-dimensional. And we talked about that a bit last week, what that means. Now, I'm not going to finish this today. I'm just starting you off, yeah, just like Wyndham Lewis started off with a story here. I think the people in the picture are quite interesting though, because they're made up of very basic kind of numeracy shapes. Yeah, let's draw one person. So we got I'll put a person here, I think. So the body looks like a few rectangles, something like this. And the head looks like something like that. And they've got a helmet on. I think I would guess that it's a helmet. Put the eye in. See how it's all straight lines, yeah? Good practice for using rulers. Oh, not all straight lines, we've got a curve here. So as soon as I say something, we discover a bit that's completely different. Okay, so we've got a kind of head shape there. I think we can make it a bit more interesting there. And we can build up the background, we can put more people in, we can put in some more shapes, almost like lightning shapes. There we are. And we can keep going until we fill that up. Now you will have noticed, of course, Wyndham Lewis's work is all black and white on this cover. You can do yours in black and white, or because you're not copying and because you're telling your own story, you could start to introduce your own colour. I think Wyndham Lewis would have quite liked that. everything in art is black and white. Very, very good. Right, okay, keep going, and hopefully I'll see some results on Teams. Well done. So, we've looked at the work of Wyndham Lewis and the cover of his magazine, Blast, and it's a second edition, so it's Blast #2. You've looked at the kinds of lines and shapes and the basic colour that he used. And what you've done is you've taken that as a starting point and then retold the story. So you've retold it using your own shapes and lines and colours. Well done. Now next week we'll be using paint again. Remember to use the materials you have at home. Anyway, I'll see you then.